Hello, it's Greg Girls and Guides. We're back. We hope you're having a happy day wherever you're watching this video content from. As always, thank you for continuing support of Greg Girls and Guides on social media and writing efforts. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome back. Today's 50 questions and answers, at least almost 50 questions. I didn't count. Today's topic: what do you need or want to know or should know about teaching English as a second language in Japan? Doesn't mean I have every answer. Every situation is, of course, different, and you should do your own research. But here's some hints, tips, tricks, and stuff that I have learned in 20 plus years of doing such things. Let's go. What qualifications are needed to teach English in Japan? Generally nothing, although to get a visa, generally you need a 4-year college degree, but it is possible to, for example, be married, have a married visa, and some poor, desperate company want you as an English teacher. Generally, they do want you to be a native speaker or near native speaker. That's usually 12 years of education in an English environment, but these days, a warm body means a lot. We'll talk a lot about that today. But generally, if you want the visa, 4-year college degree, native speaker, near native speaker, or at least some X amount of years in English education. Of course, advanced degrees, ESL, and the better jobs might want that. But generally, it's not. I have a graduate degree in music theory, so I don't know what to tell you. How do I find a teaching job in Japan? You look for one. There's lots of dispatch company sites like Interact, and I'm not promoting anything here. There's a lot, they're good and bad, make your own choices there. Borderlink in this area is popular. Kids Duo is popular in this area, and some of the other, also independent English companies look for work. Private English schools often look for that. International schools look. Gaijinpa is a popular site. Jobs in Japan I've used a lot. Kansai free ads I've used a lot. Indeed, I found my job that I had before. So you type in usually, and of course, if you're here, word of mouth, friends, family, and local community centers can help you with that. Are there age restrictions for teaching English in Japan? Some programs, like JET programs, say like 35, but I know they're older JETs. A lot of jobs are looking for younger, even if they don't say it. So if you're above the age, especially of 35, 40, 45, 50, and somebody wants you, I'd be a little wary of that. It's not impossible to get a job as an older person, but generally the people who come over here are just out of college, between the ages of 22 to, let's say, 30. You have a much better chance than somebody 50 years old trying to get a good English teaching job. But there are no particular, like, you can't teach. If you got the visa, somebody will hire you somewhere, but you might have to work really hard, and you might have to, it might not be a job that you particularly enjoy, but there are exceptions. What types of schools hire English teachers in Japan? Generally, there's the school, public school area, which are generally ALTs, assistant language teachers, or English language teachers, ELT. There's a lot of acronyms for that. You can be hired by a private school and international school. Those jobs are generally harder to get, although they do generally pay a little more. There's also Eikaiwa, which are the evening or afternoon kind of English classes and weekends that a lot of people do. And also there's just independent where you can run your own school if that's your thing. A little harder to do, but there's a lot of ways. Generally, the average person coming over here with no experience is probably going to be an ALT. So you're going to go through the dispatch companies, get hired in. It is possible to get direct hired through a school board, but that takes a lot more Japanese energy, time, and effort. And the odds of somebody taking a chance on somebody without any experience. And there are also CIRs through the JET program, the coordinator for international relations, that also take a higher level of Japanese, but there's a little less on the teaching kind of thing. How important is a TEFL certificate for teaching Japanese? Depends on the school. Generally, I don't have anything like that, and I've never needed it. I do have an advanced degree, I guess, and I'm an American, so there is some advantage. If you are not, sadly, sorry, an American with any kind of experience, perhaps a TEFL certificate might help. But some of them, again, CELTA is the common one that I've seen a lot of people ask for here. But if you're a non-native, non-English speaking person, like a Japanese person looking for a job, TOEIC, sometimes they require like a higher TOEIC score to work in like the cram schools and that. So, but generally, I've never needed it. I've never even tried to get one, and partly I'm just an American native speaker, so I don't know what to tell you. What is the typical work schedule for English teachers? ALTs are generally Monday to Friday, special events on Saturdays, 8, sometimes usually 8 to 4:30 or 7:30 to 4:30. I saw one the other day, 7:45 to 8:45. Eikaiwa, the English teachers are generally afternoons to evenings, 1 to 9 or later, and lots of Saturdays there. And I've seen recently where they're looking for Sunday have become a bit more popular. But generally, a full-time job is 40 hours. How much of that you teach varies job to job. I've had jobs where I taught basically from the time I clocked in to the time I go home. And I've had other times where I sat around a lot and only teach 3 or 4 hours a day. And again, my ALT job, sometimes I taught 6 classes a day and sometimes I taught like 1, but they do generally expect more out of the foreigner English teacher and different schools and moving around and travel. So that's something to think about. One school these days, one school, one job is pretty getting more rare for sure. How do cultural differences affect teaching styles in Japan? The Japanese school system, you usually team teach, so you're teaching in kind of a Japanese way. Other schools, depending on their curriculum, some of them want you to make your own lessons and do your own thing. And others, like the bigger dispatch schools or something like Nova or GS, they have like set curriculums and you're supposed to follow as you can. It depends. Again, it's hard to say. Like, I know people want definitive answers, but I've worked in schools where I planned everything and I've even written the lesson plans and full curriculum. And I had others where they said, Craig, teach this. So there's that. Craig is my name, by the way. What resources are available for English teachers in Japan? Some of the companies provide a lot. Some of them use electronic equipment. My last company had iPads and things, so I used that. They also had full curriculum that I ended up rewriting and redoing and lesson plans. Some of them expect you to just go on the internet and type in, how do I teach English in Japan ESL? There's a million sites. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. I usually try to mix and match, cut and paste, and you can make something, especially with the little kids lessons. There's a lot. Junior high school English usually use the textbooks and there's a little more structure there. But the little guys coming up with games, type in, ESL games for kids, you're going to find a million sites. It's not particularly hard. It used to be harder. How do I handle classroom management in Japan? Sometimes you're the only teacher, which isn't really supposed to happen often, but it exists. And so you're kind of like teacher as well as discipline and order, and that can be hard if you lack experience. And it's usually good until someone complains. If they like what you're doing and you're popular and younger and cute, it's easier. If you say something to the wrong kid and they go home and they say something, or the teacher who's with you in the room feels that you're whatever, you might hear about it. Again, every situation is different. I can't say that enough. So you kind of have to read the room, read the tea, and understand the vibe. Sometimes I've been a strong presence in the room where I control everything and it's my universe. And other times I've been like, please, oh, there's a trouble. Please help this kid. Please do that. So really, if you want to stay employed, you have to make the right people happy, including students, parents, and staff who can be your best friends or worse enemies, to be sure. What's the role of the English in the education system? Generally, it's compulsory. It's getting younger and younger. I've taught everywhere from kindergarten all the way through high school, and they offer it even in college. How much of that is center in the system? It depends a lot on principals and teachers. If the teachers in school are just interested, I've been like, Craig, thank you for doing this, thank you for showing the interest. And other times I taught schools and classes where the English teacher, for example, said, okay, you're going to give the opening greeting, hello everyone, hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you, please sit down. And that's all for today, see you next time. And that's all I did for 50 minutes. And other times they're like, please teach the English and the Japanese part, the grammar part in Japanese. So it really depends. Most of them put the I should speak English only, and I should do the English part, and they do the Japanese part alone. There's a kind of a mix, but generally a lot of the companies I've worked for prefer English only just as an immersive kind of element. But again, the reality of how well that works, it can be difficult. How can teachers incorporate technology into their lessons? My last company, I used a big monitor screen and I used iPads. Other in the older days, I used CDs and just myself talking with flashcards. It depends. Sometimes some companies have a lot of budget for that and they're really interested in that. And some of them are just expect the native speaker to come up. Another company that I worked for wanted me to make everything, all the flashcards, and use no technology, not even really pencils. And I had to buy my own pencils. So varies greatly, but it can be of use. These days, kids, especially the online after coronavirus and pandemic, a lot of online stuff. So you should know how to use like something like this. I'm doing this on Zoom. So, and you should be personable and comb your hair and look like, so you should know like, and Google has a education platform too. So you want to know the basic then touch screens and things. So it's hard to know everything because it changes a lot. What are effective methods for teaching pronunciation? I used to use a lot of songs. I speak clearly, I speak understandably, and try to get the kids to mimic and repeat back as well as they can. And shadowing often works. The younger kids, there's a little more of a window for that. As you get older and adults, I don't worry too much. If they're understandable to the point where I can understand them, I don't press them like, oh, you should round your R's or B's or B's. And people get really hung up on that, but it's not the biggest problem that they have. But yeah, a lot of shadowing, especially in the younger kids, a lot of songs, a lot of just examples, and providing a proper example, which is sometimes difficult for the native speaker if they're not fully native. I don't really sweat that too much, even around people who live with me. I just speak English all the time, and over time they get what they get, and they are as good. And same thing with Japanese. I'm not a perfect speaker of Japanese, but my Japanese, I try to sound as native as possible, and I leave it at that. How can I engage students who are reluctant to speak? Understand why they're not speaking. Some kids can't speak. That's different than won't speak. They can't speak. Hey, you do your best and you make it. Again, you realize if the kid's going to go home and not want to come back, especially in the private kind of thing, or like an Eikaiwa where the school is like getting extra money from that, you can't push kids away. It's great to have them speak, but there's a limit to what you can do. And I know that sounds like a cop out, but I try to opportunities for every kid to speak if they want to speak, and try to have an environment where they feel easy. I don't get on mistakes, especially with the younger kids. Try to encourage like just speaking, saying something, answering something, but personality goes into that, and you just got to try the best you can. But every kid is different, and classes are different, and levels are different. So I provide opportunity, trying not to get too hard on mistakes, unless it's for like a test, or I'm kind of where a parent is expecting a lot of results. That's different. What cultural activities can enhance language learning? I'm always active in the events of the school, and there are many here, cultural events and music festivals. I try to make it more to the English and talking to the kids in the hall and saying hello, even outside of classes. I lived in the same town as many of the kids. I'd say hello and how's it going? I don't really try to, from a cultural, I try not to impress my culture on them. I feel like that's kind of mean, but I try to be actively involved in Japanese culture, and know something about Japanese culture. So when they talk or show me something, I can not be the village idiot. How do I assess the student progress in English? Sometimes it's a test like Eiken or TOEIC, and that's just a straight up score. I don't really control that. Sometimes it was personal evaluation, and I wrote comments and gave stars in one company. Another one, I just wrote progress reports, and they had meetings with the Japanese teacher and the parent, and they say, well, the English teacher thinks kids are doing okay. Again, you know where your bread is buttered, as it were. So I'm careful not to criticize too much. If the kids are really a problem, then maybe I make a point like they should try harder. And the parent, if you kind of know them, they push it. But generally, I try to give an average mark. And if the kid's really doing well, I'm not afraid to say, well, but to say my kid's great in English, you know what, they're 4 years old. I mean, they're not good at anything. So again, it usually here it's some sort of form and some sort of mark, but grades, especially early here, don't really matter as much as you might think in a Western setting. I had to pass classes as an elementary school kid. Here, everybody kind of passes through junior high school. So what are some common misconceptions about teaching English in Japan? That it's about English, and that the native speaker knows everything, and that the kids really are eager to learn English. Hit or miss there. How can teachers build rapport with Japanese students? Again, I try to talk to every kid. Some kids aren't real chatty, especially if you live in the town, which doesn't always happen now. See them on the street or down the halls, make it in and outside. I try to be respectful. If you're respectful to me, I'm respectful to you. And if you're not, then it's difficult to be. What are the importance of English conversation clubs? I used to do one in my first job here, ESS, English Speaking Society. And again, kids who were interested, it was an opportunity to speak, but it's not usually a super popular club. They had speech contests and things, but it was an opportunity for them to daily speak. They got more opportunity to interact and speak with me. Some of them liked that a lot, and I still know a couple of them to this day. And some of them didn't. It was just a club because they didn't like running. I don't know. How do I prepare for an English for a teaching interview in Japan? Should know about the company, should know about the job. You should know the level that you might teach, and you should probably come up with some questions like, how do you handle discipline, or be ready for something like that. And, you know, don't be like, I take the kid out in the hall and kick him to death. I wouldn't do that. Know the vibe of the school. If you read that they're into Montessori, which is a style of education, or they're into immersion, you don't want to say, well, I just translate in Japanese. It's, you know, you kind of know what you want to do. But I just went to the websites when I interviewed for companies, or I talked to people who work there, and I got information. And you want to say in the middle with your answers while showing some personality. Ooh, I'm doing well. What are the best cities for teaching English in Japan? The bigger cities offer more jobs, but there's more competition for them. Smaller areas offer maybe a bit better job and a little more chance if you struggle to get a job because nobody lives there and nobody wants to long commutes. My company, I used to commute like an hour one way, so nobody wanted to do that. No, it was a train, a walk, and a long walk at that, in all kinds of weather, in a kind of a dangerous traffic area. So you can imagine people aren't signing up for that, but they hired me, so that's that. Bigger cities generally offer more opportunity, but smaller cities can offer more money, perhaps. I don't mean to jump through these, but these are quick hit videos that people don't have all day to watch. How do I navigate visa requirements through teaching English? The dispatch companies, they help you do all that. Private companies, they can be a little bit less knowledgeable about such things. So you really want to make sure that they're doing for you what they're supposed to. But most of that's they need you to be a legitimate employee, especially in these days with immigration and stuff. So they're going to tell you what to go, and you go to the immigration yourself generally, and you give the form, and they stamp it, and they give you your visa. And it's not really particularly difficult. It'd be harder if you were trying to open your own school, I guess. Some of that, like I have a permanent resident visa, and I had a marriage visa before that, so I'm pretty easy. I can work anywhere tomorrow if I had an opportunity. What is the impact of the JET program on the English teaching? Used to be the number one way to come here. The high salary housing was generally subsidized or even free. Now those jobs, from people I talked to over the years, there are more different schools and a little more commuting and a fewer perks, but it's still probably the easiest way for, hey, I'm a native speaker in some country, to come over here. Everything's usually set up. There's lots of support, lots of online support, school support, and when problems arise. So if you feel like you want to come here, but you're worried about, not eating or not having a place to sleep, they're the program for you. It pays, again, pretty well, but there is a limit of 5 years on that. So no matter how great you are, you're done. My first job was like that. No matter how great I was, 5-year limit, and I was done. So if you dream of staying here in Japan long term, you're going to have to find other work, which can be a step down in money and schedule and time and enjoyable. Definitely, for sure. Not always. No, I don't want to dissuade anybody, but JET programs generally don't want so much from the native speaker in general, and they pay more in general, and they're in areas with a lot of support in general, and that can definitely not be the case as you get older and you stay and you try to find follow-up things. You might even have the same. I've seen JETs stay in the same community and make a lot less for the same exact job. So, but the people in the school boards and things and the teachers expect the same kind of thing, but the rules change. You can't directly talk, and you have to talk to the company to talk to the school. The school talks to the company and talks to you. It can be a hard transition. I've had people who didn't really love that. How can teachers promote critical thinking in the classroom? Again, it really depends on the curriculum. If that allows for it, then you can do it. Upper level kids, I mean, the lower level English from, like, let's say from preschool to junior high school is all kind of like basic daily conversation. You're not going to say, what do you think about the economic progress or lack thereof in Japan over the years? Although in the some schools in international settings, certainly I had friends who talked a lot deep and read like literature, Moby Dick or Ulysses. My friend did, and the kids had to write essays. And some of those kids do want a high level of English. And some of the programs where the kids come back from living abroad from a few years want the kids to kind of have that Western, like, what do you think? How do you explain that? And you ask questions like you would I try to teach that, if I have over the years, in a native kind of way, a native Western American kind of way, where I'm asking, and I'm asking for writing and thinking and such. What are the benefits of teaching English in Japan? Salary, you get to live here, you get to experience life and culture. For many people, it's an opportunity to live here, work, learn Japanese, and move on to something else. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn, if you're weak about something in Japan, you'd be really weak about it here. And you learn what you're made of. You learn independence. You learn a lot of tolerance, and you learn how people really struggle to learn English and language that if you're teaching here is probably, you don't really think about how hard that is for people to learn. So there's that. How do I handle cultural misunderstandings with students? If it's a big one, I get help with I did get help from a Japanese teacher or staff or somebody in the community, especially at a private company where students mean money. If you run into something where you've said something like, study or sit up or try harder, and the kid goes, I'm crying, and the company is not going to generally side with you. So you want to nip that in the bud as quickly as possible. I'm not saying that happens a lot, and I was generally, I think, in my experience, well liked, and because I made a lot of effort. But certainly there were kids who didn't like when I said like study. I wanted a lot out of kids in certain situations, and some kids were just better and more interested, and a couple that were not. But the parents were like, my kid needs to speak English. I'm thinking about quitting, so the pressure's on to like really get something out of them. And so maybe from a Western side, I'm like, hey, study, sit up, grab your pencil, stop talking, sit down. And some parents and students don't feel that, and some staff see that as like, you look angry when you're a man, a foreign man doing that, even if you're like, sit down. I'm just not going to be like, swat to eat this cock. Why don't you sit down? And I have a choice to be made, and I'm not angry at all. But from a looking outside perspective, you really want to be careful that that doesn't come across as you being really angry or abusive, God forbid, in this climate, which they're really sensitive about, not only with foreign teachers, but also with real Japanese teachers, especially at the preschool, kindergarten, and elementary school level. What teaching materials are most effective in Japan? Generally, the textbooks, flashcards, it's a system of that. Eiken, the English test, the TOEIC test offer books, online materials. Songs are good for the kids. Games are good for the kids, although I don't really love playing them. Older kids, writing, reading. It's not rocket science there. What's effective is what works for you as a teacher, and what the company allowed or the school wants, and what the students are responding to. And so sometimes that's songs and games for me. Sometimes that's more writing and reading. Sometimes it's more speaking. Sometimes it's something more creative. Sometimes it's videos. I try to be flexible for the situation. Once you get locked into something and inflexible, that can be really tough, especially if you're a certain way in the company or students are expect or want something else. And from a customer service perspective, whatever keeps them coming, especially in adults, right? If they don't want to read a lot, then don't read a lot. If they want to speak a lot, speak a lot. How can teachers encourage group work among students? That's harder here in Japan. Generally, mixed boys and girls can be harder. Girls and girls, boys and boys generally work, but usually in some semi-competitive thing where kids can kind of win, but be careful when the kids don't win, you're going to have kids crying, especially they want to win. So 1-to-1 is difficult, but as a team trying to win, or you really tried hard, is kind of good. But group work can be kind of hard at the younger levels because they don't really. Games are okay, and things that they do and try to like relays I used a lot. Drawing pictures is kind of fun. They enjoyed touching the cards, collecting things. The older kids feel that a little bit less, especially after junior high. They're like, oh God, you're going to make us do this again. Although quizzes and games like that tend to be popular. Adults, yeah, they like quizzes and kind of fun more than you might think. What are the expectations for lesson planning in Japan? It depends. Again, I've planned everything and rewrote the curriculum. And then I've also been handed, this is today's lesson, my first early lessons here in the classroom with the little kids. Some Japanese teacher made 4 or 5 flashcards, and then they tried really hard, and they said, make that work for 45 minutes. And I didn't really have much control over that. You adjust to the situation. So some people expect a lot out of the native speaker. I know the upper level things that maybe the Japanese English teacher has less confidence in English, so they're putting it on you to really grade things or have a lesson that they feel meets and matches the test. But a lot of it, the education is set here. So you might have some really great creative idea that's going to get shot down quickly because it doesn't match what the curriculum or the school board or the teacher feels is the right path. And you have to deal with that. How do I deal with large class sizes? Yeah, my first little kids, they put all the classes together. I had like 95 to 100 kids and me. You try to stay upright, keep space so you don't get run over, and you kind of lean on Japanese staff to help you. Again, you try to give people chances to talk, and especially like in a communication kind of class, it can be really hard because people tend to dominate it, especially even at the adult level. The levels can be really different. A beginner level is a wide range, and intermediate is a wide range, and an advanced level is. And sometimes advanced people don't feel they're advanced, so they're in the intermediate, and intermediate people feel like they're not good enough for advanced, so they jump into the beginning, and then you're stuck trying to balance like somebody who can understand this conversation with somebody who's like, where did you go yesterday? Like I went to, and yeah, so balance it. You try to give a little for everybody and try to keep people happy so that they keep coming. But generally in a junior high school and that, my old school put them in half, A and B. So it was like 15 to 25 kids. And then the second year was like 30 kids. So it's much more show and tell than like interaction. I go around and try to, if you got 5 or 6 kids to say something, you're really great. How can teachers support students with different learning styles? Hard in Japan because everybody thinks like English is flashcards and content and songs, and they have a way that they think you should learn English. Although later one-to-one tutoring is a chance, like some kids, they get more out of reading and writing and textbooks, and other kids never, that's not their thing. They're going to get more out of just interaction with you and practice tests and things. So I found more in the years the small tutoring groups where kids have goals like trying to pass Aiken. You try to make it fun and interactive, and try to, motivation is more than the learning style. Everybody learns language the same way, whether they think they don't do or not. What role do parents play in their children's English education? Some of the parents don't know and they don't care. The younger parents, some of them have a high level of English. They love English, but their kid doesn't love English, and they expect progress that is just not realistic for a kid that doesn't make a lot of effort in classes. So they can be your biggest cheerleader and fan, like, hey, thanks for helping my kid. And they can also be, my kid doesn't say anything and I'm thinking I'm going to quit. And then that's your fault. The teacher, it's that you get very little credit when you're the good English teacher, and you get a lot of criticism when they feel like it's Craig's fault for my kid not passing Aiken. And I had a kid who failed by, it's the only kid I've ever had who failed a test that we used to give in my old company by 1 point. One of the native speakers just failed them for no apparently logical reason by 1 point, which means that no matter how well they did on the written part, they couldn't pass, and they quit the next week. And another girl was like right at the level, and she felt she was quote unquote stupid, and she came to my class. She went from a really energetic kid who wanted to speak to one who did not at all. So yeah, it varies greatly. How can teachers use games to enhance learning? Games generally, if you teach content and the kids are all interested, it's great. Often what happens is the kid gets stumped and then they don't participate. So you got 2 or 3 out of, let's say 10 kids really participating in some after school game, and 3 of them are just sitting there. You got to make sure that the games are designed in such a way for full participation, because especially when you have these observation lessons, parents are going to watch their kid. They don't care about the other kids. They want to say, why is little Yuki-chan sitting there doing nothing? So if you're going to do that, especially in that kind of setting, you want to make sure that it's interactive, and basically it's not about the English. It's about looking like I don't want to say you're lying, but it's looking like they can do things. But as far as enhancing learning, repetition and ability to think and answer and say something means a lot to a kid, much more than the English. Whether there's value in that game, I would quibble, especially in the junior high school level. How do I stay motivated as a teacher in Japan? I give my kids that I've taught over the years, and they'll all say that, and staff, my best. Of course, money matters and life matters, and some of the jobs have not been my favorite. Some of the kids have not been my favorite. Some of the companies have not been my favorite. But I don't hold that. When I'm in the classroom and I'm ready to teach, or when I'm at work, I give my best effort. And when I'm not, I complain at home. But I believe that it's important to serve as a model as the teacher, and give kids my best, and parents my best, and companies my best, whether my personal feelings of whether that's an effective thing that the company's doing or the school doing, or the kid could do more, coulda, shoulda, woulda. I don't know. I'm a highly motivated person. I enjoy learning. I enjoy teaching. So it's not hard for me to stay motivated. If it's difficult to stay motivated, either find a new job or consider like staying here as an English teacher. Maybe you should find something else, which people do. Sometimes you outgrow it. It's much less fun at 50 in certain respects than it was at 29 when I first came. What are the most common English mistakes made by Japanese students? Just not knowing the words, grammar, dropped a lot of verbs. It's like anything, they just don't know the words, the grammar, the S's, the spelling. The common mistakes are just as a process of learning, where people just don't. I guess subject verb agreement gets a lot of, because it doesn't really exist in Japanese, and just using the right verb. Watch, for example, miru is the same, right? But I watch TV. I see you. I'm looking. Please look at this. Please watch me. I guess it's not any mistake that you would make as a native speaker, they make as a Japanese person. How can teachers incorporate Japanese culture into lessons? Of course, the big holidays, Setsubun, bean throwing, Obon, or Shogatsu, the New Year's holiday, you can put into a lesson. Christmas time, all the major Western holidays are easy. Although some people do get sensitive about that. I had parents who were a little strict, and they didn't like the Christmas, so they didn't want like Christmas tree and Santa Claus. Not my choice. That was company. They did that. Um, Again, I try to incorporate more Western introduction of the holiday, and then of course crafts and things. It's pretty easy to do. The Japanese culture, I'm not Japanese, so I don't press it too much, but I like making the masks for Setsubun, like the bean throwing day, or we make a little lanterns or something like that. So yeah, it's not a core focus unless the company wants it, unless it's part of the lesson plan. But generally here, not Japanese culture for the English lessons is pushed, but Western things like Christmas, Halloween, Easter to a degree. The kids like coloring the eggs and things. What are the pros and cons of teaching at a private versus public school? Public school, generally the kids have to come, and so the lessons are a little more structured and they have the curriculum. Private schools expect more out of the teacher, especially like at a lower level, like the nursery school, preschool kind of thing, where they expect more of you as an employee. And in my experience, the public schools generally expect more out of you as the English teacher, and they expect less out of you, like from a discipline standpoint, or like helping with lunch or cleaning the school. But the private schools, like I generally was an employee too, so I'm there covering the office. I'm greeting the students. I'm talking to the parents. I'm serving lunch. I'm picking up the trash. I'm vacuuming the carpet. I'm I'm writing curriculum stuff that as an ALT or in the public school was not expected of me. Again, every situation is different. How do I handle homesickness while teaching abroad? Be busy. I had friends. I went out a lot. This is pre-pandemic, right? Find a girlfriend or a boyfriend. That's a lot of people. They fill their time in their beds with whatever. Um, Generally, I stayed busy. Now internet, I call my mom every week. I talk a lot on my Facebook with my friends. I do a lot of stuff like this if I'm homesick. I still don't really get homesick now because I have a life here I've built. But I call my mom still about once a week, say, "Hey, mom, how's it going?" And I talk to my sister. She's on vacation in Mexico at the moment as I record this. So my other sister I talk to and her kids about how her kids are doing and things. So yeah, I make my family as much of a part of my life as I realistically can. But they're busy people too. Social media helps a lot. Focus on the positive. What are the best ways to network with other teachers in Japan? Lots of groups, ESL groups, Facebook groups, X and Twitter. I talk a lot of people watching this want to be English teachers, are English teachers, or have lived here a long time. So I have a little group of people that I talk to. I don't really talk English teaching too much because I come on social media to be happy. But I do. If people have questions, I answer. And if people have lesson things or things like Aiken, I know a lot about. So I talk about that. How can teachers use storytelling in their lessons? Again, storytelling keeps kids interested. Used to use a lot of picture books in English, especially for the preschool and elementary school level. Every lesson I taught at the preschool, kindergarten level, I did a book like Dr. Seuss and such. So kids are like some imagination, and sometimes I use picture cards and say, what is this person doing? What do they have? And then you hope the kids in an English class can be like, he's playing with his dog. His dog is sad. Trying to create independent conversation. Speaking is always really difficult for people. What are the legal rights of foreign teachers in Japan? You're an employee generally, so you have the same rights as anybody. But how much those are enforced in companies, especially when you need the job and they need you, it's hard to say. Part-time jobs. There are Black companies here that can be difficult to work with. I'm not going to go into that, but it is. I can tell you from personal experience that it is possible to work for a terrible company that cares about you zero and would throw you under a bus at the first chance. And you deal with that, and you could make a big fuss about that, but you're foreign, and how far that goes, I don't know. And again, you have to be re-employed later. How easy it is if you make a big stink about that. There was a Japanese university that ran into trouble, and that the foreigner wanted tenure or something, and he did sue and he did win after several years, but he was able to ride that out for whatever reason. There's like a 5-year contract thing between Keiyakusho, the contract worker, and full employee, like permanent employee. So a lot of times you might be great for an English teacher, and then like year 4, like, oh, you're a little late. Oh, the kids are complaining. Oh, you're not quite as good as you want. And you can kind of get forced out there, and there's not much you can do about it. What's a legitimate reason? What's a non-legitimate reason? When you're a contract worker, it doesn't. There are protections through Hello Work. Generally, if you paid in and you've worked enough, you can get some unemployment. But again, for a lot of people, if you don't have a job, you don't have a visa, and you're out of here. In my case, I can stay. So it didn't really matter, but something to think about. Now, rights is a flexible and gray area thing. I would not count on too much support from a company, other foreigners, other teachers, staff, and or the government. How do I prepare students for English proficiency tests? There are lots of books in that. Generally, I focus on a lot of practice tests, focused on vocabulary. There's a lot of apps. Again, what you do in a classroom, you really have to motivate the kid to study on their own and read. I'm studying for the Japanese proficiency test now. I buy books and I study, and I hope that I can remember for the test next month. Same thing for the kids. I help a kid now for the second level, and sometimes they're really into studying, and they do a lot in their cram schools for things. And I try to find the weaknesses and say I would probably find the weaknesses, right, where they're a little weaker here, this grammar point, and try to turn that where at least they know something about it and they can get. So I try to get the kids to get all the low hanging fruit, the easy questions, the middle questions, and then do the best on the hard questions. But again, parents and kids sometimes have, I've had kids who, and parents who said 2 days before the test, please help my kid pass the level 2 ACAN, which is pretty high level. That's not going to be happy. Time and effort daily. Getting kids to crack a book, getting kids to speak is a challenge for sure, but it's possible. What are the trends of English education in Japan? Starting younger, more time in school, more emphasis on passing ACAN in the tests and passing it even to get into high school. There's been a recent trend for interviews even at the junior high to get into the high school level and the high school to get into college. Much more on the speaking side, but it's still very test-based. What you can do on the test, whether you can really speak English or not. Japan's still overall like 92nd in of the English language teaching countries, so it's not high. There's a lot of issues with that. It's not worth really talking too much. Trends of more speaking and earlier start for sure, and incorporation of the native speaker to some degree in that process is also common these days. 3 more questions. How can a teacher promote a positive classroom environment? Leave your problems and your personal life at the door. Be as happy and smiley and energetic as you can, even if you don't feel like it. And it can be a grind because a lot of the lessons are exactly the same, especially once you've been here a few years. I try to be an actor as much as a teacher. It's a performance, especially to keep kids when the Eikai was they can quit and they don't have to continue, which happens often, and especially adults where they have to like you. It's much more about edutainment than education, where the entertainment aspect and your personality, and even, of course, some of that being cute and funny and young helps. It's a lot harder as an older guy with thinning hair or no hair, if you ask who, depending on who you ask. But try to be positive, try to be helpful, try to really take a vested interest as you can in their progress as a person and as an English studier. Yeah, be positive. Yeah, it's easy to be negative, hard to be positive, easy to say, hard to do day in, day out, and year after year. 2 more. What are the best practices for teaching vocabulary? I generally suggest people use spaced repetition apps. There's a zillion of them. I use them in Japanese with great success. I often encourage kids to read as much as possible. And I encourage kids to open textbook and speak out loud. So there's lots of ways to do that. There's no right way. Just touching the vocabulary over time daily, you can't really hope to get that. And studying new words, not in big bundles, but little by little. People study too much. It's just not real. You're not going to learn 100 new words a day. You're going to learn like 10. The last one, how do I balance work and personal life while teaching in Japan? It can be difficult. My ALTG job was Monday to Friday generally, so I was done after 5 and at the bar by 5:30, and weekends mostly free unless there was some school event. Later, I worked from like 6:30 or 7 till 6 at night and 7. And another job, I had to get on the train before 7, and I was back here after 7. And I worked weekends too because they expected that, and even some Sundays. It was hard. I valued personal time and rest, but I gave it up to try to make money. And one company had a lot of overtime, so I took the overtime. You have to really assess your health. I did not do that well. Last part of this, even for the long-term foreigners who perhaps watched all this video, I did not pay attention to my health. I did not pay attention to my body, and that was not good. And that's why I'm able to record this video, because I'm waiting on surgery in December for some things. And from a emotional and mental aspect, it wasn't killing me, but the commute got old. The body broke down. The hours and the treatment at the company was not, in my view, not to talk specific, ideal. And that wore on me. There we go. Speaking of English, and it was hard. So yeah, if I take anything from this video, you give all you can to your students, your job, your school, but realize that there's very little loyalty in such jobs, especially if you're just another foreigner in a big company or even a small company, easily replaced, and they will replace you the next day. And notice and understand, the longer you're there, you might run into that 5-year rule, and you might really, no matter your best effort and everybody loves you, you're out of a job. I've seen it and heard. I know that happens to people. And Japan gets old. And what's fun is like, hey, I have a pen. What do you like? What food do you like? Can get old and stale. And yet that's the expectation. And there's often very little up in English teaching here. You're an ALT for 5 years. First day I came here, 5 years later, I'm still an ALT. Then I was an Eikaiwa English teacher at a private school, and I'm still the same 8 years later. And 4 years, I'm still just the person, and they want you to do more and more and more because they think you need it and you can't leave. And maybe you can't leave, and maybe you don't want to leave, and you have people who depend on you. So a lot goes on. The work-life balance, I don't mean to go on about that, but as the last question, it's a good point. Understand there's only one of you, and your health, mental, physical, and emotional, is important. And when you break, especially if you're not here with a family or a wife, it'll be only you in a foreign country left to navigate all the health insurance and the hospital and the doctors with no income, because they're going to throw you out quickly if you're not healthy enough to work, especially if you're a contract worker. And there's a lot of visa stuff that goes into that if you're not able to work. And even if you have those wife and or a visa that lets you stay, no income hurts. It's hard. And the money runs out, and the next job may not just come along in a heartbeat. And you may find yourself cobbling work together, if you can at all, hoping, wishing, and praying to get a nice new opportunity. So it's something to think about. Here, short term, most people I know teaching English enjoy it. They go on to other things here in Japan. They go into other countries, or they go back to their home country and go on with their lives. The ones who stay long term generally don't love it for a variety of reasons. Money is a lot of that, work expectations, and just getting older. It's harder to sit down on the ground with the kids and play and be Genki at 50 than it is at a younger age. There's no sugarcoating. The age gets you, enthusiasm gets you, motivation gets you, the lack of money when you need more than just supporting yourself, for sure. That's not to dissuade anybody. I hope this wasn't too negative. Japan and English teaching as a foreigner, I've enjoyed it generally. My jobs have been pretty good, thankfully. Students have been really good. Staff has been pretty good. Coworkers have been pretty good. But there have been times that that's not true, and it's been really, really hard. So if that's your path, I don't know. If your path is wonderful and great, and you got it in the comments on Craig Hoffman 11 on Twitter, I'm sure other people would benefit from your expertise, especially if you've been doing the gig for a few years. Even if you've had a bad experience, don't badmouth companies, and that doesn't, you're not supposed to do that in Japan. And I don't talk specifically about it. I've had wonderful experiences here where I've hopped out of bed and enjoyed going to work. And I've had other experiences when I looked at the clock at 9 o'clock and couldn't wait to clock out at 6. So I don't know what to tell you there. But yeah, your mental health, definitely important. Physical health, definitely important, especially if you live here alone, because me, myself, and I are left to pick up the pieces of your existence. That's it. As I say, as always, enjoy your life. And until next time, have a great day.